Stewart here from Drone Film Guide, the channel where we learn to fly like filmmakers. First video of 2021, and we're going back to our filmmaking roots. We're talking about the zoom functionality on the entire consumer/prosumer range of drones by DJI. Now, thanks to some firmware updates, we now have a digital zoom on the Mini 2 and the Mavic Air 2. We of course have the optical zoom on the Mavic 2 Zoom, and we have the so-called high quality field of view sensor punch-in crop type mode that we have on the Mavic 2 Pro that also gives us a zoom if you like. Now, zooming of course lets us get closer to our subjects, which is cool, but the real reason you want to be using the zoom function is parallax. And if you don't know what that is, watch this little film and we'll talk in a second. I think that montage is a pretty nice demonstration of it's what you do with it that counts. It's not about having the latest and greatest gear. All of those drone shots in that montage were filmed on the Mavic Air 2 with 2x digital zoom, and it looked pretty good to me. So as for this parallax, we're talking about the relationship of the speed at which the background, midground and foreground objects move within the frame. Did you notice how the background was swooshing around Alina? It was creating this really dramatic cinematic effect. If I cast my mind back when we started doing this, it took me a while to figure this out. Why would certain things look great in Hollywood, and if I tried to replicate it with a normal camera, you could say it just didn't look as good? And very often it's because of focal length of the lens involved. Alina and I built an entire wedding business on this concept. If you take a tighter, longer focal length, a more zoomy lens essentially, and start doing rotational movements, you enhance that sense of parallax. We got some crazy shots on these old school gimbals using zoom lenses on those gimbals. Now, they're harder to use because they require a greater degree of stabilization, and therefore put more strain essentially on your gimbal. But now we have fantastic stabilization on these drones. We can get rotational moves using these zoom lenses and get incredible compression and parallax effects. You really want to take advantage of that. So here's the thing, the effect is most pronounced when you're rotating around a subject. The background starts going swoosh and it looks really, really cool. If you're just flying forwards and backwards, the impact's not quite the same. So it's about having the right tool for the right job. When we first got the Mavic 2 Pro and it had the high quality field of view that would give you a 40mm equivalent field of view versus the 28, I think it is, wide angle, if you just fly up and down a landscape, you're actually losing a nice part of that image around the periphery of the frame. Generally speaking, if I'm just doing standard landscape shots, I want it to be as wide as possible. I want the shot to be as immersive as possible. Also, when you're flying forwards and backwards with no obvious subject in your foreground, most of the motion comes at the side of the frame. That's where you feel the speed of moving forwards and backwards. So you don't want to cut that off. You want to keep that. Conversely, if you have a subject, in this case we had Alina standing in many different locations and we're spinning around her or overtaking her, she's a fixed point essentially within that frame, and that allows us to rotate around and take advantage of that parallax effect. In terms of what settings to use for these 4 drones, here on the Mavic 2 Pro, we of course have the standard wide angle field of view, but we have the high quality field of view, which takes a sensor crop of that 1-inch sensor, so it's lossless. So we can get that tighter field of view without any deterioration in the picture. And that's really, really cool. It's one of the strong reasons to buy this Mavic 2 Pro. If we look at the Mavic 2 Zoom, of course, we can zoom in and we get an optical zoom. And this is where you need to understand the difference between optical and digital zoom. Optical zoom is lossless. It doesn't deteriorate the quality of the image. It takes advantage of the optics within the lens. If we then move to the Mavic Air 2 and the Mini 2, we have the option of a digital zoom, but that is literally just a crop in on the 4K image. So we get a 1080p crop of the middle of the image, essentially. And when we see it on a big screen, we do notice a loss in resolution. And it is quite obvious, I have to say, although as you can see, you can still get very good results that we presented to you in the montage. Take a look at this Mavic Air 2 shot. We have the 4K wide option, and that gives us our nice full readout of the sensor, and we get the standard, if you like, drone perspective of this landscape. If we switch into the so-called 4K zoom, at one-time zoom we do have a 4K image, and you can see it's punched in a little bit. It's taking advantage of that sensor crop idea that we had on the Mavic 2 Pro. So that's quite a good starting point. We can get in a little bit closer without losing any image quality. If we then tap on the little button there at the right hand side of the screen, however, and go to 2x zoom, that is a digital zoom and we see a loss in quality. But nonetheless, it does get us a lot closer to our subject, and it allows us to take advantage of the compression that follows. And if we do those rotational movements, we get that really cool parallax effect. One thing to keep in mind with the digital zoom option available on the Mini 2 and the Air 2 is that you can simulate that in post, so you don't actually have to do it there and then on the day. You can shoot wide knowing that you're going to crop in post. In some respects that's a great option because it keeps your options open. You can have the nice crisp full quality wide image and you know you can crop in. On the other hand, it is quite nice to see there and then on the day the final composition, and it helps you frame the shot and film accordingly, but you are going to be stuck essentially with that lower resolution digitally zoomed image. So this is where there's a tremendous advantage in having an optical zoom in the form of the Mavic 2 Zoom, or using that high quality field of view sensor crop that you get on the Mavic 2 Pro. Having had this Mavic 2 Pro for over 2 years now, and having had the option of creating kind of zoomy shots with the high quality field of view, we really haven't used it as much as we should have. And the first reason for that is because when we shoot in wide open landscapes like Glencoe, as I said, we want to take all of that in. The wider the better. It just looks amazing, and we want that sense of motion that comes with that wide angle field of view when we're flying up and down valleys, for example. Now the next issue is if you are shooting a subject, and it is a big if because a lot of you don't go out and shoot individuals close up with the drone 2 meters away and all that kind of stuff, but if you are, when you zoom in, it becomes a lot harder to keep that subject in the frame. All of your mistakes on the sticks are enhanced tremendously. Any vibration through the gimbal, for example, is enhanced tremendously. So it puts a lot more strain on the gear and the operator. And if I may say so myself, some of those rotations that were filmed in the introduction required a fair bit of skill and experience on my part. They were all done in manual mode, with me screaming circles around Alina using the 2x digital zoom on the Mavic Air 2. Look at this pre-drone Hollywood shot from 2015. Now I need to keep it short so this video doesn't get flagged, but you can tell straight away that's filmed on a, let's say, a 50mm lens. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but it's definitely not a wide angle 24mm lens, and it looks really cinematic. Let's step it up a notch with this other Hollywood shot from an end sequence of a 1999 film, I think it is. Now this is on a zoom lens, and look at the way that background is going. It's crazy and it looks amazing. One technicality you're going to want to keep in mind is that because there is such tremendous motion when we're rotating around subjects, you're really going to need ND filters to get motion blur on that background. Otherwise it's going to look really, really jaggy. If you look at this shot of Alina at the top of a mountain in Glencoe, it should look amazing, but it just doesn't really, because the Mavic 2 Zoom didn't have ND filters. We didn't have them at the time, and it's a shame because you can really tell when you're looking at that clip that something's just not quite right. We want that background to be all blurred out. Now, of course, if you want to get into filmmaking and cinematography with your drones, do grab yourself a copy of our free ebook, From Drone Zero to Drone Hero, 37 Tips to Get You Flying Like a Filmmaker. We have a lovely 100-minute drone cinematography crash course. Link in the description to that. It's affordable and it's been very well received since we launched it late last year. And if you want the best education that money can buy in this space, then we have our world famous Drone Cinematography Masterclass 2.0, 8 hours of premium education to get you from drone honest, drone pilot to drone cinematographer. Can you tell that I have said these things a few times in the last few years? Absolutely. Anyway, pleasure to be back here in 2021. Lots more content coming soon. Stay tuned and we will see you next time.